All right, let's begin today with liquid ink. So, the difference between liquid ink and the kind of artwork we did last week is the fact that today the line is going to change. We do no longer have a monoline when we are painting, which was the case last week. When we draw with a pen, we generally get just one thickness, and that thickness allows us a certain control over the line outcome, and it's very good for beginners because you don't want a wobbly line. But when you work with liquid ink, you also are working with a dip pen and a nib essentially works by flexing so that it can release the ink, and the amount of pressure you apply on the nib, it would flex more and more up to, of course, a certain threshold beyond which it will not flex. So I want to show you how to assemble your nibs and your holders if you've not done that yet, and also how to mix your ink. So those of you who have got the Dr. Martens ink, I'll show you this one. I'm going to be drawing partly with this and partly with Sumi ink also. Sumi ink is not a waterproof ink, but it can do a lot of other stuff with water. I'm not going to do too much of it. I'm just going to use it for demonstrating. So those of you who have two different inks, you have a fountain pen ink or you have a Sumi ink and you have this drawing ink, you can keep all of those out. Even if you have inks in different colors, a blue or a pink or an orange or something, you can bring those out as well. So you can mix up a little bit and see how that works. All right. So to mix the ink, you need a small container because we are going to decant the ink, and any tiny container is fine. We will use a little bit of the ink, and then after you're done, you can actually pour the ink back into your container as well. It lasts, nothing happens to it. And because this is drawing ink and it's not high-end calligraphy ink, these mixtures don't make a difference. So what you're going to do is, this ink comes with a dropper, and you are going to take maybe one dropper full of ink into your decanter, and then you're going to put an equal amount of water. So you can use the same dropper for that if you want to, or you can just use a teaspoon or something with which you can keep an eye on how much water you're putting in drop by drop. If you have other droppers like this, that's fine too. Medicine droppers are fine, like hair serum droppers are fine. Anything with which you can control the amount of water that you put in your container. Now, this is like a thimble size container. The reason we need something as small as this is so that when you dip your nib, the nib should be submerged up to the hole that you have in the center. I will describe more about it. So if you haven't got a container like that, you can just use small one of those throwaway, takeaway containers or something like that. Otherwise, just a small katori, anything that is just slightly larger than thimble size. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to assemble this.
Ashmita, yeah.
Oh, sorry. So there's lots of different nibs that you get for drawing, but the ones that work very well are nibs which have a fine tip, and this is how they flex. So I'm applying pressure from the bottom. Effectively, that is how the pressure responds, or the nib responds to the pressure. When you press this part of the nib, it is going to flex on the pointed side. So I've used these two nibs, Yeah, Noodlers works also. Noodlers is good. So this is our G nib. As you can see, it's really well used. And there is a, let me see if there's another G nib I can show you. Slightly less used nib. Yeah. So the G nib is called a G nib because it has a G shaped slit on the side and an oval shaped on an inbuilt reservoir in the center. And you get this G nib from different companies. You will get a G nib from Zebra, Nico, Tachikawa. So what you want to look for is this little cut. Now this looks like a reverse G and this is the correct G nib. And this one is another nib. This is, I think, from doesn't matter which one it is from. I just have a whole bunch of these BP and company nibs. I can't even tell the name. Usually the name is written over here on the neck. So this one has no cut on the sides, but it is very sharp and it's very flat, so it flexes quite a lot. So either one is fine. Going ahead, if you want to choose a nib for yourself, choose something that you can just press and see how strong it is. This is stainless steel nib, so it will flex a lot. Now, when you find nibs like these are not drawing nibs. If you have a flat edge or you have a round edge, these are not for drawing, these are for calligraphy. So avoid picking up any nib or a set of nib which has this, unless of course you intend to do calligraphy, which is also fabulous. Even this, whether it is cut or straight, drawing with this is a little tedious. Now when you have your holder will have two grooves in this on the top. One is, they're both concentric to each other. So the outer groove matches the diameter or the arc of the G nib. So you just have to place it in that position and press it inside. It stays pretty well. It's not going to come out. And the inner groove is for a crow quill, and I don't use too much of crow quill, so I'm not even recommended that you pick it up, but some kits might have a crow quill. This has an incredibly thin line, very, very thin. But drawing with this, I mean, it's good when you want to do a lot of stippling, a lot of fine design. This would be the next step. This is also perfectly fine. If you don't have the G nibs and you have only a crow quill, that works as well. Okay, now for mixing the ink. So first and foremost, whenever you're mixing ink, please keep something to protect your paper, your table surface. I hate it when ink falls and then I'm sure you'll also hate it. And then your start is not really good. So keep a pad, keep something, even newspapers is fine, and do all of your inky business on that newspaper. In fact, whenever you're drawing with ink, keep some protection underneath the ink, because if, God forbid, this were to happen, in the first reflex that you can pick it up, it does not destroy your beautiful tablecloths or whatever. When they show you women writing on Instagram with beautiful stuff around it, they're not really writing. I think they're just doing some time pass. So don't go by those fake visuals. Real artists are very careful. Okay, so here we go. Now I'm going to take just enough ink. Mine is almost over now. So I'm going to take enough ink that once I put water in it, my nib will be submerged up to the neck or up to the hole in the nib. So I have about two dropperfuls, and I am going to add the same amount of water If you want, add a little less water. If you feel that you can't decide how much is the same, then add a little less. Then you can just use the back of a brush or anything that is not going to stain too much and stir the ink gently. I think I can add a little more water. So this inkwell is made from glass and it is quite sturdy, so it's not really going to topple. But I'm not going to jinx myself by saying that that never happens. It can happen, so I just have to be very careful. And that's it. Ink is prepped. Also, an inkwell like that has a little lid. So the lid helps at least protect the ink from drying really fast. Waterproof inks are designed to dry fast and dry fast, like speed as well, and also the how fast they are on paper, how much they adhere to the paper. So if you keep it exposed to the air, it is going to keep losing water, and every now and then you are going to have to add a drop of water to make sure that it is liquid enough, maintaining the consistency. Okay, so one of my rags has become the base, and the other one I'm going to use to keep wiping my nib after every few lines. Waterproof ink also cakes onto the nib so that you will slowly and steadily start getting a slightly thicker line. So after maybe about 5-6 minutes, just wipe and remove the ink, and then you're good to go. Okay, everyone ready? Good. So those of you who are working with regular inks like Sumi ink, just the normal dilution is fine, maybe 20 to 30% is good. And if you're working with fountain pen ink, you don't need any dilution at all. All right, now let's have some fun. Yeah.
One sec. What is the reason you dilute it?
So these inks generally are very concentrated. You are supposed to dilute it so that you get the darkness of the line as you need it. And they can be, so you know how these inks are made, right? They are ground from very dark pigment, and then they will add an element like maybe gum arabica or some chemicals which make the ink fast. It will not run. But they are still in the liquid form. They can be diluted a lot as well. So if you use it without dilution, you tend to get a very acrylic like finish. So
Okay.
it's a little shiny because of those additives. And even if you dilute it to 50, 60, 70%, very often some of the better inks still remain dark. That, in fact, is how you can tell a good ink from a bad ink. And as it starts becoming more watery, the black starts becoming grayer and grayer and grayer. And that also can be a shade that you can use in ink. Everything does not have to be black. So that's what we're going to do today.
So you want us to do like a 1:1?
1:1 to begin with, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. Now, forget everything you know about um, drawing, especially if you feel drawing is scary, you're not very good with pencil and whatnot, because we're drawing with ink today. It's a whole different game altogether. So first, let's start with understanding how the nib and the dip pen, the nib and the ink work together. So we're going to do a pressure test. Keeping your pen, okay, so let me just check. Do any of you hold your pen really close? So if you do that, I would like you to just move your pen, your grip a little further away from the tip. And the further you go, you can take your thumb a little back also. So essentially, you're going to be drawing like this, not like this. Okay. Once your grip changes, your line is going to be very different. In all probability, it's going to be very wobbly and very light. So let's make some vertical lines with this new grip. And see what I'm doing. I am keeping my hand firm and I'm just moving my fingers, changing the angle of the pen while I keep contact of the nib with the paper. So I'm not dragging this down. This is not what I'm doing. I keep my the heel of my palm steady and I make lines like this. Much of ink drawing is made like this. Your hands move, your fingers move really fast and your hand is planted steady, unless of course you're drawing lines which are larger than about 4 or 5 inches. Now the same line we're going to draw, but this time we're going to add a little bit of pressure. And you will add pressure after the line begins. So you'll see your lines start off thin and then suddenly become thick, and then as you release the pressure, they become thin again. So this is the difference between the lines that we made last time, the mono line, and this is the dynamic line. And you can keep making all sorts of thicknesses or changes in the line as you want. Like for example, you can start really fat and then make it thin towards the bottom. Now you can do it in reverse as well. You can start thin and then add pressure. So you get something like a teardrop shape. And then you can also keep changing the pressure so that you get thick parts in other parts of the line. Now, like we made the vertical lines holding the pen like this, try making horizontal lines. This time, we won't hold the pen like this. I mean, you can, of course, if you want to, but you can also hold it sideways and drag your hand along the side like that. So this time, I am keeping my fingers firmly planted and dragging my hand. And this too you can. Now the reason you want to do this rather than drawing lines like that is beyond the hairline, which is this line. If you want pressure, you won't be able to add pressure holding the nib perpendicular to the line. The nib must always be parallel to the direction of the line if you want pressure. Okay, now with this, the next part we are going to do is create some values. Values are the different shades you create. A light shade or a dark shade, but using just um, one ink color. So values can be created by changing a few things about your line, like we did last time. But this time we are also going to be changing the pressure. So the two things to keep in mind for values is pressure and distance. So the first uh, tone or value we will make, we are going to use only hairlines and keep the distance between the lines as uniform as you can. And then you can change, the angle, and keep the distance between the lines the same and create a particular value. Jasmine, hold your book. Yeah, keep your other hand always on the book or just held like that on the table. Then your hand moves a lot freely. Now on the other side, we have max pressure. So very carefully make very thick lines. This is a very artificial maximum pressure we are creating. You don't really ever do it, but you should know the threshold of your nib. And we're going to wait till this ink dries before we will make the darker shade beyond that. And now in between, you can try something else. So start off with lines which are pretty close and then start increasing the distance between them. So you have low pressure to high pressure. And now you can do the same thing. My ink is still not dried. So I'm going to first make this middle texture where I will change the distance between the lines as I go further into the texture. So it's the same hairline, but I have manipulated the distance. And because of that, you can see that the top left corner is really dark and the bottom right is really light, although the line is exactly the same throughout. Okay, and the last one, add maximum pressure. Remember to hold the nib in the same direction as the line. Alright, so now that you know how this pen works, the rest is just up to you. This is a very, very versatile, mad tool. The way your hand moves, the ink and pen will do whatever you want it to do. And the whole idea of pen and ink is to be very free with your drawing. So, when you're making illustrations with pen and ink, remember to not be too restrained and not be stuck up or too hung up on everything looking too precise, too perfect. Like, for example, we did a whole lot of these textures last week, and everything was made to look very clean, and the lines were so clean, and all of that. This is one way of going about it, but that's not the only way to go about it. So, say for example, you're just drawing simple shapes. You don't draw a square like this because you want a perfect square. If you're drawing a square, you have to learn to draw a square which is free. There has to be an energy. If you're drawing a circle, if you're going to draw it like that, it is going to look very restrained. Let your hand flow. So in some places your ink is going to gather because the lines are overlapping. It might become a little dark. It doesn't matter. All the shapes that you make can have a certain freedom and not this forced accuracy. So with this in mind, we are going to create some shapes, but I'm going to ask you to just randomly throw in some pressure wherever you feel like it. Like, let's make a square where you have pressure in some places you don't have pressure, and see how that looks. How about circles? Downstrokes will give you pressure. If you're doing them sideways, there'll be some resistance, but give it a shot anyway. The pens are pretty strong, so nothing is really going to happen to them. How about let's make a cylinder? How about a cube? Now let's try shading this with the nib. So see how I'm allowing my line to go a little beyond the borders that I have drawn for the object. So pen lines work very differently on paper. They sort of create an atmosphere, and through that you're able to discern an object. So you don't really find these lines coming out of the object disturbing. They don't take away from the beauty or the truth of the object you're trying to draw. Okay, how about a little complicated curved line for the cylinder, and then just a column of diagonal lines. See how that is looking. Now, in this circle itself, how about let's make a sphere out of this? So, I have made a certain spot which is going to be the highlight, and I am making a flat texture on the rest of the circle. So, currently, it just looks like an asymmetrical donut. Then leave another circle concentric to the highlight blank. Make another line around the center like this, and in that make more lines. So see, when I'm going beyond the border of that particular area, I'm creating a fuzzy line. And then let's bring the shadow down further. I'm just using a hairline, but I'm changing the distance between the lines. And because this is liquid ink, in certain places, if it just comes together, it will create a very dark shade as well. So if you want your lines to look good or your shading to look good, flick the lines up a bit. Keep your line in control, but don't draw a steady line like that. Make it like a pendulum stroke to end in this swoosh like thing. Okay, how's everyone doing? Are you having fun with the ink? Good, good. Those of you who are afraid of drawing and generally tend to get stressed with drawing, keep an eye on your breathing. It is very possible that you might be holding your breath thinking, what am I going to do in ink? Is it going to look bad? Don't judge your line. It's going to be fine. Funnily enough, after you start making your lines in ink, the next time when you're drawing with pencil, you will see how differently your hand moves, and you'll be able to sketch much better with pencil because your hold itself will change. Now these concentric circles, let's try and see if we can make them look like one is darker than the next. Start off with just the same, and then change the angle for the two in the middle. And then change the angle for the center one. And now we've changed or created 3 different values. By now you should have wiped your nib at least a couple of times so that you get rid of the residue that's drying up on the nib. This one can make a very nice texture. It can also look like one of those wells. Yeah, stepwells, correct. Basically, you can just make any shape and say, okay, let me just shade it and see what I can make of it. Okay. Now, let's address these different textures that I've shared with you. So, learning to make textures is one of the best exercises you can do for pen and ink. I'll show you the ones that I've selected. Now, we have to recreate an illusion of these feathers. So, the shape, the position, proportion, and how those feathers are overlapping, and also they have their own color and shadows and all of that. This is one. Then you have this probably alligator skin where it's not a uniform texture, so we have to create this. But then we also have round rocks. How do these rocks look different from this texture? And in the same vein, we also have corn on the cob. How do we make this look its own texture? Then we have rocks that are stacked on top of each other. Then we have something as smooth as a tomato, something as flaky as an artichoke, and something as dramatic as this driftwood, dead tree, fossil. So we are going to arrive at this texture through all the others, but we'll first start off with this feather texture. We are not going to make it look exactly like the feathers. We are just trying to create this illusion. So we won't make all the feathers. I just want you to interpret it in ink. So if you want, I'll just show you this once. Don't do it with me, just observe this, and then you can take 5 minutes and you can make it yourselves. Aram se, I won't rush you. So firstly, let's start with making a small box in which we can make this texture. So making these boxes is great practice to draw straight lines. And no matter how unequal your squares are or rectangles are, try to maintain the distance between the boxes if you want your page to look nice, or someone to look at it and comment that this really looks like it's printed. Okay, so I'm just making 4 right now, because if there are like the tree and all, I don't want to make it in a box. The tree, tomato, artichoke, I'll make it in this blank space. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start off very randomly from the top, creating just a U shape. Look at how far I'm holding the pen, and I'm going to move my hand in this situation right now because I want my line to be steady. If you're comfortable drawing with your fingers, that is cool too. And just study the structure. This is a very easy structure. I'm sure you have made this several times before. But make sure that the line is not too smooth. Contrary to people's beliefs that in order to make art, you should be able to make a straight line. I don't know where people have got that impression. We really do not need straight lines as frequently as one might think, and definitely not perfectly straight lines. That is what architects need. Now, some places the feathers are not smooth edge, so I'll just make lines, vertical lines to indicate that edge. That's it. And then there's more feathers coming down. This is it. This is some random structure that I've got. Then let's start with some of the feathers on top. There seems to be a central line that runs through these, and you have a different texture on either side. Those textures are not important, but the values are important. So I have shaded the entire feather in one tone, and then I am going to shade the other side in another direction to create this variation of tone. We are not making that traditional feather shape here. We don't have to. That is the difference between drawing the feather and creating an illusion of the feathers. So here we are translating the tones we see into ink lines. We are not trying to recreate the texture of feathers as we imagine it or as we expect it to be. Because this is how the bird is going to look like, a bird in ink rather than an anatomically correct or almost like a graphic bird. It should not look like a graphic. And all this has been done in hairline. But then I can add a little thickness along the edge of some of these feathers. This will give me quickly a shadow. Now while we are making lines for this texture, it's not compulsory that you use only one texture at a time. So if you feel that it might help to do a little bit of stippling here, go ahead and do that. A little bit of scribbling here, go ahead and do that also. We don't have to be uh, loyal to any one texture so that we don't do any others. So what your picture should look like in the end is a black and white version of the photograph you see. If you were to squint your eyes when you see this picture and you squint your eyes when you see the photograph or reference image, you should be able to see the same values in the same place. And even in that squinted state, you should say, oh, this looks something like maybe feathers.
Aditi, can you bring the page a little closer to the
Yes.
screen?
Yeah, just let me go finish this.
Thank
I just keep thinking that as soon as I bring it closer, it becomes a little blurred and then you can't see anything at all. Hopefully it won't blur, but if it does, just let
This is fine. This is fine.
Okay, okay. Are you able to make those lines really fast and loose and easily? Or are you finding that challenging?
For me, I think the pressure has been a challenge. I think I've been pressing too hard. So the
Is
line.
that so? Okay, are you holding your book, Shali?
And I just realized I was not.
Okay,
Yeah.
that could well be the problem. I think I should start making these t-shirts. Hold the book, don't hold your breath. Okay, if you guys are comfortable with this one, let's move on to the leather. So in the leather, there's many ways you can go about it, but try to study the texture first and see if there's a neat trick that you can employ. Now, here there are two factors. One is just this crisscross of creases running across, creating certain extra, I guess, different spaces, and then within that space, there seems to be like a rounded, scaly element that becomes the texture of the skin. So we can try making something like that. So keeping an eye on the texture, you can start off with making a few lines, not with pressure, that go in a general direction one way. Some places the lines come close to each other, some places they go further away. Obviously, where the lines are further away, the scales are going to be slightly bigger, and other places they will be smaller. And I've only made in the bottom half because in the top half that line or rule changes and you have more dominant shapes made in almost a vertical stroke or crisscross of lines. So here's again one thing, never take your eye off the reference image, always keep that. Now how can we do this? We can run some lines crisscross like over here, and then you can draw the shape of the scales within this. This is a brilliant texture to practice just making these loose shapes that I was telling you about. You can draw some cracks running through these as well. And then here you don't even have those horizontal lines running through. You just have almost like a thick padded texture. So here again, keep an eye on the lines made by these. And there's a nice dark, thick line along one edge here. And on this side, I think we can draw lines that are running on the diagonal in both directions. I'm not mistaken. So your textures will look nice if your lines are not perfectly straight. If you make multiple lines, even then that'll look nice. And even in this, you can create shadows using texture like that. Over here, we have a certain line shadow, so you can make that. And sometimes, if there's like a big fold on the skin, you can absolutely run that shading across the texture like that. Like on the right hand side, there seems to be a shadow that's falling on the entire piece. So this goes over the whole texture. You don't have to individually make that shadow on each of the scales. And there, the rules of shading remain the same. If the darker you want the shadow, the more ink you need to place, regardless of what the texture beneath it is. Now, while this is drying, I want to introduce liquid ink, and I'm mixing two inks here. I'm using Sumi ink, which is just a water soluble ink. This also can be used, but with Sumi, I'm just creating a lighter texture. Why am I doing it with Sumi? I can do it with Dr. Martens as well. So I'm just using the lid to create a lighter shade. Just wiping the excess off and giving a softer edge. So it all comes down to understanding the values, where you have stark shadows and where you have just a subtle shadow, like behind these feathers as well. You don't want to paint everything. You don't want to obscure the beautiful texture you've made. You want to enhance the texture by adding one more layer. Okay, do you need a couple of minutes with this texture? Then we'll move on to the rocks. Okay, now for the rocks, shall we do those? This is just a fun texture. I've thrown it in because I wanted to loosen up your hands. Although these rocks are opaque, we are going to try and recreate this as if the rocks are transparent for the drawing bit. And this is going to be almost like a texture in itself. So just make oval shapes. Some you will place next to each other like that, and some you can actually overlap, just a subtle overlap. And see what kind of effect it creates. Very often we are so afraid to do these fun things because we overthink it. We would say, if I'm drawing rocks, how can I show them as transparent? That'll look like bubbles, that'll look like something else, it'll look wrong. And we are right in thinking that because we are thinking it, we are intellectualizing what we are seeing. But if you learn to say, I just need to create an illusion, then you free up a lot of possibilities for yourself. Now, after you have drawn all these rocks like this, some overlapping, some not overlapping, you can then choose to fill out some spaces in between these rocks as shadows. And now instantly you start getting some kind of dimension and some depth. The moment you add contrast to a picture, you will get a sense of depth. This is high contrast. You have only black and only white. But now you can just choose which rocks you want to make on top and gently make like a crescent shaped shadow on any one side. And even if you have made those rocks overlapping, the shading will become more important than that line and lift your stone up. And I love how dramatically it creates this. So, comparing the two, this kind of a spontaneous line and illustration versus you have the usual very, very precise line, boring, very, predictable, of course, impressive, but nothing really earth shattering. But this one just comes in with such flamboyance, and you just say, oh my god, what are you doing? My rocks are so much more accurate than this, but why is this working? Why is this looking good? No explanation for that. Another thing to remember also is that our brains are very, very quick at understanding what you're trying to say. So, in a situation like this, if I just shade a few of the rocks and leave the rest the way they are, the brain has got it. It really doesn't need everything to be spelled out. So, in terms of aesthetics, sometimes it looks nicer to leave textures incomplete. And just to make this even a little more interesting, I'm going to change the size of the pebbles. Alright, now I think you'll be able to do almost all the textures. But I want to address this tomato and the artichoke. While all the others had lines, this tomato does not have lines on it. It doesn't have a texture. In fact, it is devoid of any kind of texture. It is only a smooth surface. So, after having all this fun with textures, how do we take on a tomato which has nothing to offer? So, here we are going to look at how to translate the roundness and smoothness. And in this case, now we will bring in some disciplined lines. Whenever you see a sphere, you will notice that if you make lines which imitate the lines of the longitude as we've seen them on maps, you get a better result to show roundness of the object. It's not necessarily the only way, but it's a good way in itself. So we can create this with a very casual line also. So to start off, if you don't see the structure of the tomato, literally start off with a circle and then carve the tomato out of the circle. Draw the stalk The stalk does not have to look light, just try to recreate those lines. My tomato is nothing like the tomato on in the references, but it starts looking like a tomato because I have made these squiggly lines on the top that resemble something like a tomato. This is our brain at work. Now we have a highlight over here and a highlight behind this, which I'm going to ignore. And then we have a very light space on top, a medium shade in the middle around the equator. Then in the southwest, it is the same shade as the equator. There's a light patch over here, and then we have a dark shadow on this side with a cast shadow on the surface. So let's start off by making these round shaped lines along the center. So this is the mid-tone. As you come to the center, the lines become straight, and as you go to the right, they start bending a little to the right. They go all the way through the center as if there's nothing else happening. Almost looks like a pattern at this stage. Now we can continue the same texture, a little denser towards the bottom, left and in the center, and then you can continue it a little lower on the right hand side. Now on the top part of the tomato, we can add curved lines but changing the angle. So this is going to make part of the original shade look darker. Part of it is going to look light. Can you see what is happening over here? This is starting to become a little more shadowy wherever the lines are crossing over. And it's becoming a soft shadow. I can add a few more lines over here, rounded, and I get more of that shadow. So wherever I want a shadow, I'm just going to turn the line a bit. And now I'm using the same lines to also mark a tone on the top. Just a few lines, one after the other right now. So the sequencing of these lines is such that these will not look like a texture, whereas these also don't look like a texture because they are all sequenced one after the other. But these do because there is no sequence as such. So you can see how making lines one after the other in this shaded pattern, the line pattern, gives an illusion of smoothness. And you can keep making these lines till you get the result you want. So if you feel that you have made one part really dark, you want to lighten it, just make something else even darker. If I carry on, I'll soon be able to make this as smooth as a black and white photograph. Then you can put shadows like that. keep changing the angle of your line. Are you able to see the smoothness? Although there are so many lines on the tomato. Now, one problem I have found is when everyone is trying to make shadows. The one foolproof way of making shadows is make very thin ovals. Don't make the oval too round. I have almost filled up the whole area close to the apple with ink for the shadow because I want it to look really sharp. But I don't want the edges to look this sharp, so I'm going to extend the line outward a little bit and not put a border around this. That's it. Are you getting it? Good. I just love this. It's just like magic. Okay, now one last bit I want to show you. We still have about 8 minutes for class to end. It's that driftwood, which I still think is a tree. It's not a piece of driftwood. I'm seeing it as a tree, so I guess it's to each their own. Now, this does look rather complicated, right? But look for the important lines over here, and those may not always be along the edge. There's one line that runs a little from the inside of the left bottom, and it goes somewhere and merges with a line that is coming from the top on the right hand side. Then it breaks over here, and then there's some texture. Then this texture is so close to the texture of the leather or the crocodile. And then there are multiple lines which create the texture of the dead wood. So what we want to do is create these two different types of textures, but we don't have to make them accurately like that. In this case, the trick is to not let your eye leave the reference image. So I'm going to go ahead and make my tree come this way, and at some point it's going to go behind this block, I think. I'm first going to draw not a hairline, but some pressure strokes. Over here again, there's some pressure stroke like that, which goes around that little ball. So I can make all these pressure strokes in between, and then I can create the texture of the concentric lines. And you'll realize that you don't really need to make all the lines. I'm not a big fan of sketching right from the edge of the page, but I think this one is going to look nice. Now As we come to the more barky or external bark side, the line is not smooth anymore. So we start drawing that kind of a texture.
Oh,
So,
yeah. No.
okay, so the texture we make will be more like squares overlapping or just vertical lines which are fractured. So don't really draw rectangles as such, but look at what kind of lines you see there. Some of them are obscured by shadows. You can draw those shadows, and the rest you can draw smooth lines like this. Now, some places those squares are going to look really odd, so texturize it, put some line texture on it, put some scribbles over there if you want to also. And if you persist, then you will start seeing the texture emerge. But because this texture has so many different possibilities, it will help to be a little patient here. So we have this one line going this way, and then my tree is going to take a turn, go behind this box, come on this side here. Some places these lines are breaking as well, so let them break. And then in some places you can just make a silhouette of the borders. Scratchy border for this side of the tree. This one is a nice one to complete, because it looks really impressive once it's finished, all these textures. And the square bark sections also are a little curved in the edges some places. They might also have their own texture on it. And then we can also give an overall texture, either with ink or with the brush. Okay, so the rest of the textures you can try to finish in your own time at home and share them on the group, and then we can have a discussion.